Record. So now it's recording.
Yeah.
Okay. Is that recording? Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
that's right.
Yeah. So I will first speak about the case writing. Okay. So just give you some ideas what would be appropriate writing when you address questions like the group first assignment.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm just going to, so the approach I'm going to talk about is called diamond approach.
Mhm.
Okay.
Okay.
So when if you are taking math questions, so it's pretty clear, right? You have a definite answer. So 1 + 1 = 2, right? So
Mhm.
there's no room for discussion, right? So for everyone, the answer will be 1 + 1 = 2, right? There's no room for discussion. Similar
Yes.
ideas for physics, maybe for science, the chemical formula, molecular formula for the water is H2O, right? There's no room for discussion, right?
Mm.
Accelerations, right? So 9.8 meters per square, right? Per second
Yeah.
square. There's no room for discussions, right? So in those questions, you are just providing an answer. That's a straight line, right? Okay, so from it just it's all pointing to one answer, right? But here I'm going to show you when you talk about diamond approach is when you are having alternatives, right? When you are discussing on some topics. So basically, for example, I'm going to talk about the question you asked. That's the sales of sales. What is that? Sales of the royalty rate,
Yeah.
right? Sale of the royalty rights, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so first of all, this is an issue. You identified, oh, this is an issue, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so then what are the possible treatment, right? What are the possible treatment? So again, here I'm not looking for there's room for discussions, right? Here, what is this, right? Is this an asset, equity, income, right? What it is, right? So you want to think about that. So and then so you have a reason to think this is as a maybe as a capital, right? As a capital. And then you also can think this as an income, right? Maybe income. So you have two alternatives. So so when you are making a discussion, okay, so you first have right, you start from a point. This is your issue here. Here's your issue, right? This is the issue. So that's your issue, right? So then you have different alternatives to go. Alternative 1, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then alternative 2, right?
Yes.
Okay. So basically, you could have more than 2 alternatives, right? Depending on the question, right? You could have you could well possible to have more than 2 alternatives. So I'm just gonna write. Just give me 1 second here. So here is alternative number 1, okay, and here is going to be alternative 2, okay. You have discussions, right? So then when you talk about these 2 alternatives, you have discussion, right? You have discussion, okay. So you may reach 2 different conclusions here, right?
Yeah.
So you may have, depending on the alternative, you may reach in one conclusion, number 1, right? And you could also have a conclusion number 2, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so don't leave it like that. You are the professionals, right? You are giving advice, right? So then what you do is you have a conclusion, right? You have a conclusion. So basically, this is what you're gonna do. Okay, so what should I do here? Oops. So then you want to have a conclusion, okay?
Okay.
And
Compare two alternatives and then get the final conclusion.
yeah, exactly. Are you able to see everything clearly?
Yeah, I can.
So now you have these two, right? That's your two different, you have reached these two different conclusion, right? Based on your discussion. And then you have to compare, right? You have to compare and reach a recommendation, okay? So that's the key. You have to reach a recommendation here. Recommendation.
Okay.
This is a complete
Discussion.
diamond kind of approach, right? Do you see why it's called diamond?
Yeah.
That's a diamond, right?
Yeah.
So I first learned this when I was in the CPA program. So we were taught how to write the case response in the CPA exam. Okay. So this is one of the approach I learned is about diamond approach. Okay. So we are not at a high school level. We are not doing science. So nothing is black and white, right? So you are not expecting to say, do this, right? So that's not advice, okay? Basically, you identify the issue and you talk about the possible alternatives, right? The possible alternatives. Under accounting, the IFRS frameworks, remember, we have different alternatives, right? For revenue recognition stuff, right? You talk about it, discuss about it, and then have elaborate on what happened, right? And then you compare different results to make a recommendation based on the user's objectives. Remember, you talk about the user's objectives, right?
Yeah.
So which one you want to advise, you want to recommend, right? Then you have to keep in mind what's the user's objective. Okay. So this is the diamond approach. Okay. So in this particular scenario, we are talking about the sale of royalty rights. Okay. So you have possibilities, the capital item or income item, right? And then, then if it's an income item, we have to talk about what we are learning, right? If you say, okay, so if it's income, right? That's not the end of it, right? You have to talk about
your income.
You have to talk about what? Because we are just learning this, right?
Your recognition of income.
You have to talk about, okay, if it's income, okay, and when should I recognize the income, right? Yeah. Should I recognize now? I have received the payment, the sales of the royalty rights, or I should defer the recognition until in the future periods, right? So those will be the discussion, and then you want to conclude, right? Do you recommend to recognize this as a capital income? If it's income, why are you going to recognize the income, right? So that's based on your analysis of the scenario, and but it has to be within the GAAP framework, right? Using IFRS or SP, right? What are the possibilities of the different alternatives? So this is what I really want to share with you, and also with the rest of the class, the diamond approach. So for any issues, try to think of alternatives. Don't think, oh, do this, do that, okay? So it's not that black and white, right? So make sure at least identify maybe another one more alternative. So some issues maybe there's no alternatives, right? And then you just talk about the issues, right? Just talk about issues. And you want to talk about how, what are the managers, so if it's a different case, right? In the sample case I gave you, right? When you want to talk about it, right? Different approach, how that's going to affect. For example, if the users cares about earnings, right? So how these different alternatives affect earnings? In that example, the users also cares about the debt to equity ratio, right? Because that's one of the things in the bank covenant. Okay, so the users does not want to violate the bank covenant, right? So they are really concerned about the debt to equity ratio, right? So then in that case discussion, I'm not sure if you have read the marketing template. They always talk about it, okay, how these alternatives is going to affect the debt to equity ratio, right? And
Okay.
then, and then which one should go, right? You can't say, oh, go with the lower one. No, maybe the lower one is not allowed under the GAAP, right? So all your discussions has to be under GAAP, okay? And then you could analyze what's the manager's, the information providers' bias, right? Their objectives. Is that efforts? Is that GAAP, right? How that affect your users' objectives, okay? So in the first, you identify users' objectives. So for example, right, in this case, you know, if it's on income, right, because a lot of the users, stakeholders, they're going to take a royalty or take a portion, right? Other investors take a portion of the income, right, as a payment.
Yeah.
So then your income numbers is very important, right? Your income numbers will be very important, right? So if it's higher, the payment will be high, right? So you can see there are important implications, right? So yeah, anyways, I just want to point you towards this direction. So make sure when you analyze different issues, this is the royalty of rights, and also even for the sales of reservation, right? Sales of sale of reservation. There's also about, would you recognize the timing of the recognition of the fee, right? Would you recognize it now or future, right? That's the two alternatives, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, the same idea for government grant, right? So do you consider that's a income or it's a capital, right?
You mentioned in the video with Josh about the difference between capital and the income.
Yeah.
I remember you said the income is a regular payment on regular basis, but capital is a rare event.
Basically what I was saying is for capital, right? You think about the share capital, right? So investors, they buy shares, right?
Yes.
So the share capital is part of the equity, right? It's on the balance sheet. Income is actually on the income statement. So that's the big major difference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Sounds good. That's very helpful.
Yeah. I mean, you know, this is new to you guys, right? So it's unfair for me to just let you guys do your own. So I want to give you more information, so that help you to write a good case, and so then you learn how to do this in the future. Eventually, in your CPA program, in the CPA exam, this is the way you want to do, like the diamond approach.
Okay. Sounds good.
Okay, awesome.
Okay.